Hi, Jonathan York from Bay Financial Partners, looking at investment markets. Another big week for the US market with a lot of the big tech companies reporting this week. Most noticeably Apple and Microsoft. Now, so far on the earnings, it's really been pretty good. You've seen about 87% of the companies beat their estimates for this quarter. And on the average beat there, it's been around 21%. With these US companies, it's really as important really for the guidance as well. Certainly the earnings season is coming on, and it is pretty good in terms of the sort of reported earnings and the sort of beats versus expectations. But it's more important for the guidance. Most analysts and economists are sort of expecting a reasonably sort of rough sort of first quarter, but then starts to pick up in the sort of second quarter, and really the second half of 2021 really does look in pretty good shape for some pretty major growth. So that's all bodes pretty well. Certainly the US economy is pushing on a pretty reasonable rate. Obviously, the big issue is still COVID and the sort of rollout of the vaccinations. We're now getting a clearer picture of the sort of mess that the Trump administration left that particular program in. The talk of warp speed really looks more like snail speed at present. Despite what was stated by the Trump administration, really the infrastructure and the sort of process and the sort of clear plan for getting that vaccinations distributed appear to be in sort of disarray. And the Biden administration is now working very hard to get that up and running and more sort of efficiently distributed among the population. Date has been announced for the Trump impeachment as well. That's going to be in February, and it's really quite interesting now because most of the rioters that have been arrested have sort of come out and said, they were acting on his instructions. They're acting on what they thought the president wanted him to do. So it's just going to be very interesting to see how that sort of plays through. We're going to further good indication as well on the US economy towards the end of the week with a lot of the PMIs being released. And it's just going to be interesting to see how, because they are sort of forward looking rather than sort of backward looking in previous data. Just interesting as well, the IMF is a little bit more upbeat on global growth, although obviously the big sort of question mark is the rollout of the COVID vaccine. On the back of renewed sort of optimism for global growth, oil is still trading well above those $50 a barrel. It's just going to be interesting to see how it does sort of play through, because at present it's still looking as though potentially it could sort of see 55, possibly even $60. Now, the UK has just passed its grim milestone with the first country in the EU sort of block now to pass over 100,000 deaths. It also has the most deaths per 1 million population. But on the plus side, you have seen over 7 million people vaccinated. There is a real sort of rush to get people vaccinated to try and counteract the sort of spread of the disease and obviously try and halt the mortality rate. And there are just sort of signs in the UK that potentially they're starting to get on top of it a little bit. But certainly the rate of increase in cases is starting to fall just a little bit. But it's still very high. Likewise, Europe's still battling with the virus, and really just trying to struggle to keep on top of it. The major issue appears to be that obviously the sort of unauthorized sort of public gatherings and people that just don't seem to regard any of the rules or the lockdowns, etc., and just want to meet and sort of spread the virus further. Closer to home in Australia, again, is still sort of grappling with the virus. They've announced that their vaccine is now maybe only a couple of weeks away. And again, it's just going to be interesting to see obviously the length of time to roll out that vaccine, because it just takes time. With a population of around 20 odd million, it's not something that can be done just overnight. But in terms of the Australian economy, still looks in pretty reasonable shape, also being helped by the sort of increase in commodity prices, raw materials and minerals. Now here in New Zealand, the sort of first case back in the community was reported this week, and that sent the government into a bit of a tailspin. Because despite what had been said, once the case actually arrived in the community, there really was a sense that they were sort of scrapping to try and get on top of it, and really didn't quite know what to do. Just very fortunate that so far most of the close contacts have come back with a negative test. So now there's just a nervous wait for the next sort of week until they get tested again, just to see, make sure that they say it is negative and it hasn't been sort of transmitted through the community. But again, on the plus side, surprisingly now, the vaccine in New Zealand might be available a lot sooner, possibly sort of cleared as early as sort of next week, and then start to get distributed. Now that's certainly a major change from previous statements before this sort of COVID case got out in the community. We were looking at sort of April or May time. So if, and it is a big if, this case is contained, then again the New Zealand economy looks in reasonable shape. It's sort of pushing on a pretty reasonable rate, obviously being buoyed by the housing market, record low interest rates, plenty of sort of infrastructure and sort of building taking place. Obviously the one sector that is sort of struggling is obviously tourism, as now we're coming towards the end of the holiday. And international tourists aren't here to sort of take up the spending slack. Some of the sort of tourist hotspots really are struggling. So obviously there's still that sort of search for yield out there as investors are looking for income, and with the record low interest rates, it is pretty tough in sort of term deposits and bonds. So if you are looking for income options, call us on 0800 867 323 or go to the website www.bayfinancialpartners.co.nz for lots of interesting articles, and we look forward to speaking to you soon.